Dane Holloway hadn't meant to return. Not to this town, not to the ranch, and definitely not to the dust-covered memories that clung to the place like cobwebs. But when the official letter from the probate attorney arrived, thick envelope, gold-stamped seal, and the words final estate transfer, he didn't have a choice anymore. His grandfather's land, the sprawling Holloway ranch that had sat untouched for over a decade, was now legally his. The drive from Houston was quiet, just Dane, his battered Silverado, and the low hum of his past creeping in through the silence. He remembered summers on that land, climbing the ridge, branding calves, watching thunderstorms roll in like angry gods. That was before law school, before the firm, before the courtroom battles turned him into a different kind of fighter. When he reached the familiar dirt road leading to the ranch, something felt wrong. The trees were taller. The trail was narrower. And up ahead, blocking the entrance, stood a 10-foot black iron gate. Newly installed, glossy paint, and plastered across the top. Ridge Point Meadows Community, private access only. He killed the engine and stepped out. The air smelled of pine and trespass. On the other side of the gate, trimmed hedges lined a stone path that used to be wild grass. There were security cameras mounted on a pole, blinking red like mechanical eyes. Then, he saw her, a woman in her late 50s, with perfectly curled hair and a clipboard clutched in both hands, was making her way toward him. Her walk was brisk. Her expression, rehearsed. "Can I help you?" she asked, stopping exactly 6 feet from the gate. "I'm here for my property," Dane said, motioning past her. "This is the Holloway Ranch." Her brows raised. "That area now falls under the Ridge Point Meadows, HOA jurisdiction. Do you have clearance?" Dane blinked. "Clearance? I own the land." She studied him. "Name?" "Dane Holloway." Her eyes lit up, not with recognition, but confirmation. "Ah, yes, we've been expecting some legal transition. But until you complete the HOA compliance packet and receive board approval, I can't let you enter. I don't need board approval to step on my own land." She smiled, sharp as a scalpel. "Actually, you do. See, the road you're standing on, that's community access. Technically Ridgepoint property. Trespassing on that could be a civil violation." Dane took a breath, slow and steady. He'd dealt with federal judges, class action suits, and billion-dollar companies. But somehow, this woman, this prim, power-drunk HOA president, was pushing his patience to the edge. "You got a name?" She straightened proudly. "Karen Billings, HOA president, community liaison, and compliance director." He leaned on the gate. "Listen, Karen, I've got the deed in my glove box. My name is on the title. And this land has been in my family since 1918. There's no HOA on earth that can rewrite that." Karen's tone didn't change. "Perhaps, but until legal boundaries are reviewed and verified, you're not authorized for entry." He stared at her for a long moment. "You're making a mistake. I'm following procedure." A hawk cried overhead. The silence stretched finally. Dane turned back toward his truck. "Fine," he said. "I'll be back tomorrow, and I won't be alone." She didn't ask what he meant. She just made a note on her clipboard and watched him drive away. But as he pulled onto the highway, a slow, calculating grin spread across Dane's face, because Karen didn't know what kind of man she'd just tried to block. She thought she was dealing with a stranger. She didn't know she was dealing with a ruthless lawyer, and he was about to make her regret every rule she ever wrote. The next morning, Dane was already at the county clerk's office before they unlocked the doors. He didn't come with an attitude. He came with fax-printed copies of the original deed, the probate confirmation, the land registry maps from 1972, 1995, and most importantly, the most recent GIS overlay. The ranch's boundary lines hadn't changed. There was no record of annexation, no easement granted, and certainly no homeowners association rights listed anywhere in the property file. The access road, the one Karen claimed as community property, was still technically part of the original Holloway parcel grandfathered in, protected by a state ruling from back in 2003. The HOA had built their paved roads around it. Dane had to give them credit. It was clever. Just clever enough to confuse someone who didn't know the law, but Dane knew. He left the courthouse with a file folder thick enough to sink a kayak, drove straight back to Ridge Point Meadows, and parked 2 inches from the iron gate. This time, he walked. Karen was there again, as if she'd been waiting. "Mr. Holloway," she said, as if greeting a delivery man who showed up a day late. "I hope you've had time to consider the proper process." Dane held up the folder. I did more than consider. I confirmed. He opened the first document, the deed with his name, legal stamp, and county signature. Still doesn't change the easement across the access road, she said coolly. No easement, he replied, flipping to the next page. This road is on my land. It's been Holloway land since the county lines were drawn. Karen crossed her arms. We have legal representation, Mr. Holloway. We can take this to mediation. I am legal representation, Dane said flatly. Licensed in 2 states, partner at Langston and Burke, and I've taken down developers bigger than your HOA. Karen's expression cracked. Just slightly, Don pulled out a printed satellite image and pointed to the highlighted parcel outlines. You see this line? That's your HOA's boundary. This, he tapped the center, is all mine. Road, ridge, and everything in between. Karen didn't respond. She simply reached into her bag and pulled out her own sheet of paper. We sent this to the state commission 2 months ago, she said. A formal request to extend community jurisdiction based on parcel encroachment and community use patterns. Dane snorted. A request isn't a ruling. She shrugged. Pending doesn't mean denied. It also doesn't mean legal. The tension hung between them like barbed wire. Neither moved. Tell you what, Dane said finally. You give me the gate code, and I'll walk the line myself. Quietly, no construction, no noise. I just want to see what's left of the place. Karen hesitated, then shook her head. I can't do that without a board vote. He smiled, the kind of smile lawyers used when the paperwork was already in motion. Didn't think so. Dane walked back to his truck, slowly and deliberately, then reached into the back seat. A few minutes later, he returned, this time with bolt cutters in hand. Karen gasped. If you touch that gate, I will call the police. You're welcome to, he said, snapping the lock clean off with one sharp clink. The gate creaked open, like the lid of a long-buried secret. He stepped through. No hesitation. The road was exactly how he remembered it, dirt and gravel, winding through the sycamores and into the hills. The air changed with every step, warmer somehow, freer. The ranch house came into view, still standing but aged. The porch sagged, the paint had peeled, but it was his, and as he stood at the edge of the old homestead, something caught his eye. A flash of red barely visible, mounted high in a tree. A camera, sleek new, blinking so they'd been watching. Dane didn't react, not yet. He just walked onto the porch, pushed open the creaking door, and stepped inside. The dust hadn't settled yet, neither had he. But one thing was certain, the war had begun. Morning broke over the ridge with a golden haze. Dane stood on the porch of the old ranch house, sipping black coffee from a tin mug. Boots planted firmly on the worn wood boards his grandfather had nailed down half a century ago. Peace. For about 3 minutes. Then the sound of tires crunching gravel reached his ears. He turned to see a sheriff's cruiser winding up the road. Lights flashing but no siren. Dane set the mug down and walked to meet the deputy before the dust settled. Out stepped Deputy Frank Latham, local mid-40s, slight limp, and a look on his face that said he didn't want to be here. Mornin', Mr. Holloway, he said, adjusting his belt. Let me guess, Dane said. Karen called. Frank nodded. Says you broke into a gated community and cut the lock. Claims it's felony trespass. Dane held up the folder again, the same one from yesterday, with even more documents tucked inside. She's bluffing, Dane said calmly. This land's mine. The gate's on my property. The lock was illegal. I have the full chain of title records. Want to see? Frank took the folder and flipped through a few pages. I know this land, he said. Knew your granddad, but you know how it is now. New developments, new rules, gray areas. There's no gray here, Dane replied. It's a scam. She's overstepping. Frank scratched his chin. I'll file this at the station. But I've got to advise you maybe try to work with the HOA. Keep things calm. I didn't start this, Dane said. Frank looked over his shoulder, toward the road. No, but Karen's got pull. County board, golf club, her brother's on zoning. She'll make noise. Dane smiled faintly. Good, I've been quiet too long. Frank paused. One more thing. There's a security firm reporting surveillance tampering. That ring a bell? Dane nodded toward the tree with the blinking camera. It's not tampering, if I film it too. The deputy gave a half smile, handed back the folder, and got in his cruiser. I'll log it, he said. But be careful. These people fight dirty. As the cruiser rolled away, Dane glanced up at the camera again. Still blinking, he stepped inside, grabbed his laptop, and called an old friend, Marcus Talley, a cybersecurity analyst who owed him more than a few favors. Still know how to hack a surveillance feed? Dane asked. Do lawyers even ask questions like that out loud? Marcus joked. Send me a picture. I'll trace the signal. Dane uploaded the footage and sent it off. Then he went to work. He cleared out the ranch house's front room and set up a folding table, whiteboard, and printer. This wasn't just a fight over property, this was an ambush, coordinated and masked in community rules. He'd seen it before, and he knew how to unravel it. That afternoon, a new visitor arrived. A man in a private security uniform, stocky, crew-cut, mirrored sunglasses. You the landowner? The man asked. Last I checked, Dane replied. Karen sent us to establish perimeter visuals. We've got orders not to let anyone violate the HOA perimeter. Dane cocked his head. You mean my fence line? No one's to disturb the shared access points. Dane stepped closer, voice cold. You're on private property. Get off it or I'll file charges for trespass and unlawful surveillance. The man didn't flinch, just turned and walked back down the hill without another word. Dane stood still, eyes scanning the tree line, the ridge, the road. Something was happening here, something deeper than a nosy neighbor or an overreaching HOA. This was about control, land, legacy, and Karen wasn't just bluffing anymore. That night, Dane sat on the porch again. But this time, he had a rifle across his lap and a file full of HOA bylaws beside him. The floodlights turned on across the way. 2 new guards stood watching at the edge of the trees. Dane sipped his coffee, cold, now, and smiled into the dark. Let them watch. The lawyer had come home, and he didn't scare easy. By sunrise, Dane was already hammering boards into place. The front porch needed new railing. The barn needed new doors. The house needed a miracle. But the more he worked, the more his blood settled. This wasn't just his grandfather's land anymore. This was his warpath now. He hired a small construction crew from the next town over, people who didn't care about Ridgepoint Meadows or HOA politics, just honest work for honest pay. They started clearing the field and setting new fencing posts along the original property line. That's when the citations began. First, a notice was taped to the gatepost. Unauthorized exterior modifications within community view. Cease activity pending permit application. Dane chuckled, pulled it off, and tossed it in the truck bed. The next morning, a uniformed code enforcement officer arrived, clipboard in hand. Sir, you're being fined for noise ordinance violations and lack of landscape conformity. Dane raised an eyebrow. Landscape conformity. Your property's grass height and fencing aren't in alignment with Ridgepoint aesthetics. He handed the officer a thick stack of paperwork. This is a registered agricultural parcel, not subject to suburban uniformity laws. The man looked flustered, like he'd been sent in blind. Still, I have to issue the warning. Then do your job, Dane said, and I'll do mine. That afternoon, the drone appeared again, low, persistent, hovering directly over the construction cruise truck. Dane grabbed a chunk of gravel and launched it. The first throw missed. The second didn't. The drone dropped with a sickening thud, spiraling into a patch of weeds near the barn. The workers clapped within the hour. Karen was back this time with 2 HOA board members in tow. She didn't bother with pleasantries. You just committed a property crime, she snapped, pointing to the shattered drone. It was flying over my land, Dane replied. Unregistered, unauthorized, and threatening. That makes it an invasion of privacy. The man beside her, a tight-lipped retiree named Walter Greeley, cleared his throat. Mr. Holloway, we're prepared to offer a compromise. Suspend your activity for 2 weeks, and we'll allow temporary access through the main road. Generous, Dane said dryly. But I already have access. It's called ownership. Karen stepped forward. You're provoking conflict. This isn't how civilized communities operate. Dane folded his arms. Then stop trying to colonize my ranch like it's your backyard garden. Walter held up a manila envelope. Then consider this official. You're being fined for multiple violations. The total is $14,750. Due in 10 days. Dane took the envelope, opened it, and calmly tore it in half. I've been sued by corporations worth billions, he said quietly. Do you honestly think your fake fines scare me? Karen's face flushed. You're making a mistake. No, Dane said. stepping back onto the porch. "I'm making a stand." They left in silence. But that night, something changed. Dane returned from town to find the side gate pried open. Fence boards trampled. His newly delivered construction supplies, gone. Tools missing. Tire tracks where they shouldn't be. It wasn't vandalism, it was a message. He called the sheriff this time. It wasn't Deputy Frank, it was someone younger, less familiar. The new guy took a few photos and shrugged. "No cameras covering this side," he said. "Hard to prove intent." Dane walked him to the tree with the blinking red light. "Maybe not," he said, "but I think they caught it." The deputy squinted. "You saying the HOA's surveillance caught their own crime?" "I'm saying Karen's not nearly as smart as she thinks she is." That night, Dane called Marcus again. "Need you to trace footage from the ridge camera facing south," he said, "and pull any time-stamped anomalies after 7 p.m. "You sure you want to go that deep?" Marcus asked. Dane stared out into the night. "No," he said, "but they already did." The floodlights didn't come on this time, but he could feel the eyes out there, and something told him this was no longer about fences or fees. This was about forcing him out. But they were forgetting one thing. Dane didn't back down. He litigated until people begged to surrender, and now, this ranch was his courtroom. The next few days passed like coiled rope, tight, tense, and ready to snap. Dane stayed busy. He installed motion lights around the barn, mounted trail cams near the gate, had Marcus hack into the HOA's public surveillance feed. All legal. Technically, they'd posted the cameras in view of his property. He just made sure he was watching them too. The footage didn't lie. On the night the supplies vanished, a dark sedan with no plates parked near the HOA clubhouse. Two figures exited, hooded. One walked toward the supply stacks, the other toward the side gate. Karen had reported no activity that night. Claimed the clubhouse was locked up. The board had gone home early. Yet there it was. Her silver Range Rover parked right beside the sedan. Dane smiled. She was getting sloppy. But before he could act, the attack came from another angle. It started with a phone call. "Mr. Holloway," a stiff voice said. "This is Officer Daniel Perez. I'm going to need you to come down to the station. You're being investigated for vandalism and property destruction." Dane paused mid-heimer. "Come again." "Someone spray-painted offensive symbols on the HOA clubhouse last night. Slashed a vehicle's tires. Surveillance footage shows a man matching your description near the scene." Dane's jaw clenched. "What footage?" "There's a clear view of a male in a gray hoodie and jeans. Same truck, same build, same hat as you wore yesterday." Dane's voice dropped to a chill. "I was at Westland Hardware. From 6:30 to 9 p.m. There are receipts. Cameras. Ask Jerry at the counter. I spent 15 minutes arguing over fence staples." There was a pause on the other end. "You'll still need to come in for questioning." Dane sighed. "I'll bring my lawyer." "You are a lawyer. Then I'll bring a meaner one." He hung up, heart pounding. Not from fear, from fury. Someone was trying to frame him. And they were doing it the old-fashioned way, planting a look-alike, choosing a night when he was known to be out, targeting the HOA clubhouse to stir outrage. The tires slashed. Probably her own. He wouldn't put it past Karen to sacrifice a set of Michelins to get him cuffed. He called. "Marcus, pull the HOA cameras from last night. All angles. I need overlays, timestamps, everything." "Got it," Marcus replied. "Also, I ran the drone that crashed earlier. You'll love this. It was registered to Billings Property Consulting LLC. Guess who's the sole member?" "Karen." "Bingo." Dane hung up and grabbed his jacket. 2 hours later, he sat across from Officer Perez in a beige interrogation room, calmly sliding a USB stick across the table. That's surveillance footage from 2 feeds showing Io was 11 miles away at the time of the incident. And this, he handed over a paper receipt, matches the time code exactly. Perez reviewed the footage. His brows drew low. "This figure in the hoodie, not you." "Nope, too short. Walks wrong. Also, I don't wear hoodies." Perez leaned back, the pieces falling into place. Dane didn't press further. He didn't have to. Later that evening, he stood in front of his whiteboard, connecting dots with red string and sticky notes. Karen wasn't just trying to find him out of existence. She was engineering a legal paper trap, one complaint at a time, manufacturing outrage, building a false pattern of aggression. Get him arrested, get the community to turn, isolate him, pressure him to sell. Classic HOA. Chokehold. But what she didn't know, couldn't possibly understand, was that Dane had spent his career tearing down cases built on false narratives, and she'd just handed him everything he needed. That night, Dane drafted a lawsuit. Karen Billings, named defendant. Ridgepoint Meadows, HOA, secondary charges, defamation, invasion of privacy, malicious prosecution, unlawful interference with rightful property use. By midnight, it was filed. By morning, the court had issued a preliminary hearing date, and Karen, she was about to get her first taste of real paperwork, the kind she couldn't tear in half. By the time Karen opened her mailbox that Friday morning, the papers were already cold. Thick white envelope, stamped, certified. Dane had made sure it arrived first thing, before her jog, before her green smoothie, before she could gather the board for their morning gossip ritual. Inside, an official summons, and 47 pages of carefully structured legal argument. Each footnote a nail, each exhibit a hammer. She barely made it past the second paragraph before her hand started to shake. Back at the ranch, Dane didn't celebrate. Not yet. He knew how lawsuits worked. They didn't explode. They eroded. Like rain on stone. One ruling at a time. But what he did celebrate was silence. No drones, no guards, no paper fines. Karen had gone quiet, and quiet was always a sign of retreat or regrouping. The court date was set for the following Thursday. Small town, fast docket. Just the way Dane liked it. He spent the weekend combing through Ridgepoint's HOA bylaws, and then deeper into the financial filings, tax statements, contractor approvals, and community meeting transcripts. What he found wasn't just petty overreach, it was rot. Misused funds. Selective enforcement. Bribes for lot preference. A $12,000 community landscape grant spent on Karen's personal backyard pool installation. He compiled it all in a tidy, time-stamped file. Marcus helped cross-check the email metadata and confirmed the HOA's internal server wasn't even encrypted. Monday morning, Dane delivered discovery requests to Ridgepoint Meadows, HOA's listed address, which, not surprisingly, was Karen's house. Her husband tried to slam the door in his face. Tell her the deadline for compliance is Wednesday at 4 p.m. Dane said calmly, failure to provide documentation will be treated as contempt. Back at the courthouse, his motions were already being reviewed. The judge, an older man with a reputation for disliking games, agreed to fast-track the hearing. By Tuesday, Dane's name was all anyone in Ridgepoint could talk about. Residents whispered at mailboxes. Side eyes flew at community meetings. A few even reached out to Dane privately, quietly thanking him, anonymously dropping hints. She's been doing this for years, one woman wrote in an unsigned note. You're the first person who didn't run. The day of the hearing arrived with overcast skies. Dane showed up in a gray suit, sleeves sharp, tie tight. Karen came in with a younger lawyer, one from the city, not the local firms. Polished, expensive, but new to the county court. Big mistake. As the judge opened the case, Karen's attorney objected to the framing, claimed harassment, claimed HOA privilege, even tried to argue that Dane's property fell within Ridgepoint's evolving residential border. Dane stood calmly, hands behind his back. Your Honor, he said. I submit county GIS maps from the last 30 years, showing no jurisdictional change. I also submit the HOA's founding charter, which clearly lists their southern boundary 500 feet north of my ranch's entrance. He turned, locking eyes with Karen. And I also submit evidence of willful misrepresentation, including forged enforcement letters, a falsified annexation request to the zoning board, and documentation proving the defendant hired a private firm to surveil my home without consent. The judge raised an eyebrow. You're sure about all this? Dane smiled faintly. Every file is watermarked, time-stamped, and traced. Karen's lawyer went pale. We would like time to review. Denied, the judge said. You had discovery. You ignored it. The courtroom fell silent. Ms. Billings, the judge said, turning his gaze to Karen. You have 10 days to produce documentation refuting these claims. If you can't, I'll rule in Mr. Holloway's favor and recommend full restitution, including punitive damages. Karen's jaw twitched. She didn't speak. Dane didn't need her to. He'd already won the first round. Outside the courthouse, news spread quickly. By nightfall, 3 HOA board members had resigned. The Ridgepoint Facebook group was in full meltdown, but the real win came just before midnight. A knock at Dane's door. An older man in flannel stood there, hat in hand. Name's Gerald. I used to sit on the HOA board. Got pushed out last year after I questioned the books. He handed Dane a flash drive. You'll want this, he said. It's every meeting Karen thought we deleted. And just like that, the final piece fell into place. The flash drive Gerald handed over was gold. Inside were folders labeled with months going back 3 years, all titled like nothing more than boring budget updates and landscaping notes. But once Dane started digging, the rot was impossible to ignore. Audio clips of Karen bullying board members. Video of votes conducted with only 2 people in attendance. Approvals for expenses with no receipts. And one grainy but crystal clear clip of Karen saying exactly what Dane needed. If we push just a little more, he'll leave. They always leave when you bury them in enough red tape. It was time-stamped, labeled. Confirmed by 2 former members, who reached out anonymously after hearing about Dane's lawsuit by Wednesday morning. Dane had built a war chest of evidence, but Karen, she was unraveling. That afternoon, she marched straight up to Dane's property. No security detail, no clipboard. Just fury in a tailored blouse. You think this makes you right? She snapped, arms crossed tight. You think this ends with your little courtroom stunt? Dane stood calmly on the porch, watching her like she was a wildfire slowly running out of fuel. I think you've forgotten who you're dealing with, he said. You came for me with cameras, drones, fake violations, and lies. I came back with the truth. Karen's lips curled. This isn't about truth. This is about control. This neighborhood needs rules, boundaries. This isn't your neighborhood. Dane cut in. You annexed parts of this community illegally. You forged access rights. You crossed onto private land and weaponized an HOA like it's your personal kingdom. She stepped closer, shaking with rage. I built Ridgepoint. I made this place livable. You don't get to walk in here with your boots in your barn and pretend it's the Wild West again. Dane didn't blink. You built a trap, and now you're stuck in it. Her eyes darted to the camera mounted on his roofline, still blinking, still watching. Recording this, too. She spat. Dane didn't answer. She already knew. Karen turned to go but then spun back, her voice dropping to a dangerous hush. This isn't over. I don't care about lawsuits or land deeds. I've survived worse than you. You haven't met anyone like me, Dane replied, voice steady. But you will. In court. As she stormed off, Dane watched her shrink, down the long gravel road, shoulders tight, pace uneven. The next day, the sheriff's department showed up, but not for Dane. Karen was arrested at her own front door to charges of tampering with county records. 1 charge of stalking, and pending investigations into misuse of HOA funds. The footage Gerald had provided was airtight. Residents watched, in stunned silence as she was led to the squad car. Some filmed it, others just stared. No one intervened. The sheriff didn't gloat. He just nodded once to Dane as he passed. It was done, or so it seemed. That evening, Dane stood alone in the center of his land. The wind was soft, the air clean, and for the first time in weeks, the silence felt real. He walked the perimeter of the ranch, the old trails, the forgotten orchard, the ridge his grandfather used to sit on with a flask and a telescope. He stopped at the north fence and looked out toward the HOA homes, all neat boxes and manicured trees. He should have felt triumphant, but all he felt was tired. And then, just as he turned to head back, he noticed it. A figure, watching from the shadows of a tree line. Not Karen. Someone else, hooded still. He called out. No answer. The figure slipped behind the trees, gone as quickly as it appeared. That night, an envelope appeared at his front gate. No stamp, no address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, anonymous. Karen was just the beginning. You've made enemies you can't see. We're not done. There was no name, no signature, just a single black HOA logo stamped in the corner. 1. Dane had never seen before. The envelope sat on Dane's desk like a loaded weapon. No name, no fingerprints, just the chilling words. We're not done. And that unfamiliar HOA logo, sharper, more corporate, darker in tone, as if it belonged to something much bigger than Ridgepoint Meadows. Dane stared at it for a long time. Then he picked up the phone. Marcus, I need a favor. Again, let me guess. Anonymous threat. Weird logo, and you want to know who sent it. Dane exhaled. Exactly. Send me a photo, Marcus said. Give me an hour. Dane scanned the sheet and texted it. Then he stepped out onto the porch. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting long shadows across the field. The ranch felt quiet, too quiet. Karen had been processed, booked, and released on bail 2 days ago. Her lawyer was already trying to arrange a settlement, begging to avoid trial. Dane hadn't responded. But now, someone else had entered the game. He checked the perimeter again. Motion sensors were untouched. Trail cams were still online. The fence was intact. No more drones. But the sense of being watched hadn't disappeared. By the time he walked back inside, his phone buzzed. "Marcus, you're not gonna like this," Marcus said. "Go. That logo doesn't belong to Ridgepoint. It belongs to Unified Community Systems, a management firm based in Dallas. They operate under a bunch of different names. Shell corporations. Private equity backed. Looks like Ridgepoint outsourced their HOA enforcement to UCS a year ago." Quietly, Dane's jaw tightened. So Karen wasn't the top of the ladder. "Not even close," Marcus said. "She was a pawn. Loud, arrogant, disposable. UCS runs over 70 planned communities across Texas. Some of them are facing federal scrutiny. You stirred up a bigger hornet nest than you thought." "Any idea who sent the letter?" "No direct tie," Marcus replied. "But whoever sent it had access to Ridgepoint's board communications." "This wasn't a warning. It was a test," Dane murmured. That night, Dane drafted another letter. This one addressed directly to the Texas Department of Housing, Oversight and Community Affairs. He attached every document he had, every shady HOA transaction, every trail leading from Ridgepoint to Unified Community Systems. And then he sent copies to 3 investigative journalists. If UCS wanted a quiet war, they picked the wrong ranch. By the weekend, local news had picked up the story. A segment aired featuring drone footage of Ridgepoint's illegal expansion attempts, interviews with former board members, and a wide shot of Dane's ranch with the caption, "The lawyer who sued the HOA and won." Karen disappeared from public view. Her house went dark. Rumor had it she'd been forced to resign from every board seat she held. But Dane wasn't celebrating. Because 3 nights later, he woke to the smell of smoke. He bolted upright. The ranch house was fine. But out in the field, flames licked at the edge of the barn. He sprinted outside, grabbed the hose, and called 911. By the time the fire crew arrived, half the barn was scorched. The cause? Deliberate, the chief said. Accelerant used. Looks like arson. Dane didn't flinch. He just nodded and stared at the dark tree line beyond the fence. They'd made it official now. This wasn't just about land or rules, it was about power, and someone, somewhere, wanted him gone. The next morning, another envelope appeared. This time tucked under his door. No threats, just 2 words, "Stand down." He burned it in the fireplace without reading the rest. Then he called Marcus again. "It's time we go public, all of it. The shell companies, the bribes, the lawsuits. You, in." Marcus paused for half a beat. "I've already started compiling a report. I think you just declared war." Dane looked out at the rising sun, casting gold across the ranch. "No," he said softly. "They did." He holstered the .357 he now kept near the door and walked back outside. Because this time, the courtroom wasn't big enough. This time, the war had crossed the fence line, and Dane Holloway wasn't just defending his ranch anymore. He was defending everybody's.